Welcome to this presentation by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, on its methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience. As part of its mission, DHS has been studying the nation's critical infrastructure in many different dimensions since the creation of the department in 2002. A key aspect of this work is the examination of interconnected infrastructure systems at local, regional, national, and international scales. In this presentation, we will briefly walk through this important infrastructure assessment mission of CISA's and touch on the nature of this work over the years. But the main focus is on the methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience, a document that was released in 2021 and designed to assist a wide variety of public and private sector partners in examining infrastructure risk and resilience on a regional scale. The methodology is available on CISA's website. This presentation is an introduction to the methodology. It is designed to encourage individuals and organizations who may have a stake in better understanding and addressing infrastructure resilience and security at a regional scale to take a closer look at what CISA has learned over the years and to consider how, where, and when some of these insights may be applicable to their own situations. CISA is here to help with and facilitate the types of infrastructure assessments and analysis discussed in the methodology. At the end of this presentation, details are provided on how to reach out to CISA for more information. Thank you for watching. CISA Overview. CISA was established as an agency in 2018, but its work, focused on the security and resilience of the nation's infrastructure, goes back to the beginning of DHS in 2002. CISA leads the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to our cyber and physical infrastructure. It works with federal, state, local, tribal, territorial officials, public and private sector owners and operators of critical infrastructure, and academia to defend against today's threats and build a more secure and resilient infrastructure for the future. The threats faced, digital and physical, man-made, technological, and natural, are more complex and the threat actors more diverse than at any point in history. CISA is at the heart of mobilizing a collective defense as it leads the nation's efforts to understand and manage risk to our critical infrastructure. Its programs and services are driven by a comprehensive understanding of the risk environment and the corresponding needs identified by its stakeholders. This work is conducted both through CISA headquarters in the Washington, D.C. area and an expansive field-based presence in every region of the nation. The Infrastructure Security Division of CISA includes the Infrastructure Assessments and Analysis Branch, which provides a variety of services, including management of various security and resiliency assessments of the nation's critical infrastructure. These voluntary assessments assist CISA and its public and private sector partners in better understanding and managing risk to critical infrastructure. RRAP Overview. Included among this infrastructure assessment work is the Regional Resiliency Assessment Program, or RRAP. The RRAP began in 2009 and was designed to move beyond examination of individual pieces of infrastructure and instead consider interconnected infrastructure assets and systems in a broader regional context. The RRAP is a voluntary program that uses a structured approach to examining infrastructure topics of all kinds across the nation. It annually solicits project nominations from around the nation. The RRAP works collaboratively with public and private sector organizations to conceptualize projects, build multidisciplinary project teams, collect and analyze data, and present options for improving regional infrastructure resilience. Since 2009, CISA has conducted more than 120 of these RRAP assessments, exploring issues related to regional resilience of energy, water, transportation, communications, manufacturing, healthcare, and many other infrastructure systems. RRAP projects can focus on hazards and threats of any kind, including natural hazards, accidents, pandemics, terrorism, and cybersecurity concerns. Introduction to the methodology. As these numerous and diverse RRAP projects have been completed over the years, CISA and its partners have learned many valuable lessons related to the topics, such as what is required upfront for a successful regional assessment of infrastructure? What are the likely challenges when conducting assessments? Who must be involved? How to collect and analyze the required data? How to devise and present outcomes? CISA has distilled and captured these lessons in its methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience. Released in 2021, this methodology provides critical infrastructure resilience and security practitioners with a common framework and process for assessing complex infrastructure resilience issues at a regional level. It presents a generalizable, repeatable methodology for conducting voluntary regional infrastructure resilience assessments that users can tailor and apply to their own needs. The methodology's intent is not to provide a step-by-step instruction for every element of an infrastructure resilience assessment, but rather to outline key principles, define a repeatable methodology that is applicable across different levels of government, the private sector, and all infrastructure sectors, and provide examples and resources that the users can consult as they move forward with implementing voluntary regional assessments of infrastructure resilience. The intended audience for the methodology includes any organization with a stake in the regional resilience and security of critical infrastructure operations, such as state, local, tribal, and territorial governments seeking to understand the resilience of critical infrastructure in their areas of responsibility. Regional public-private partnerships that facilitate collaboration among infrastructure owners and operators in the private sector and government partners responsible for public safety and community planning. Private sector entities that own and operate infrastructure in communities nationwide and may participate in broader regional resilience efforts with other industry and government partners. Federal personnel who work continuously with private sector partners and government counterparts to further the mission of infrastructure security and resilience. And researchers who are pursuing improved approaches to examining and addressing critical infrastructure resilience on a regional scale. The types of organizations and individuals that can benefit from this methodology are diverse, with distinct roles in the regional infrastructure resilience mission. and may have differing technical expertise, resources, and priorities. Nevertheless, all can utilize the methodology described here and apply it based on their own capabilities and resources. Therefore, this document is intended to inform all levels of assessment, from basic to intermediate to advanced. CISA shares this focus on infrastructure resilience with many other government organizations and private sector groups that are likewise seeking approaches to examining and addressing complicated resilience challenges. This methodology is intended to complement the growing body of infrastructure resilience thinking and work. Methodology structure. The methodology includes two parts. Part 1 on foundational concepts draws from policy and research sources to establish a common foundation for what resilience means in the context of critical infrastructure and why studying resilience at a regional level is an important activity for public and private partners. Part 2, the heart of the document, dives into the 6-step process for conducting regional infrastructure assessments. It articulates core elements of the general, scalable methodology and defines key processes and analytical techniques. We will now walk through the methodology, beginning with the basic overview of Part 1, and then focus in detail on the 6-step assessment process discussed in Part 2. Part 1, Foundational Concepts. Although the concept of resilience has been applied in a variety of disciplines for decades, it has more recently received growing attention in the field of risk management. In particular, the critical infrastructure community has evolved from a primary focus on protective security in the 1990s to a broader emphasis on security and resilience. In the Homeland Security domain, Presidential Policy Directive 21 established national policy on strengthening and maintaining secure, functioning, and resilient critical infrastructure in sectors that are essential to the nation's security, public health and safety, economic vitality, and general quality of life. The directive defined resilience as the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions, including deliberate attacks, accidents, or naturally occurring hazards. For the purposes of understanding the resilience of infrastructure from a regional perspective, the definition articulated in PPD 21 is a logical and widely used option. The core elements of that definition can be characterized into 4 building blocks: preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. Together, these 4 building blocks can help practitioners deconstruct the concept of resilience into actionable steps and ultimately gauge progress in enhancing resilience over time. Another way to think about these building blocks of resilience is to conceptualize them in the context of infrastructure operations from a timing perspective. Preparedness and mitigation measures are pursued before an event happens in order to help an organization anticipate what could happen, resist the efforts of an adverse effect, and absorb the impacts that arise in the aftermath. Response and recovery measures affect actions taken after an event occurs and triggers a disruption in normal operations. During these phases, activities center on helping an entity address the immediate effects of an event, adapt to a new operating environment, and recover core operations to the previous or a new equilibrium. Dependencies. Another fundamental consideration when examining infrastructure resilience at a regional level is the role of dependencies and interdependencies across critical infrastructure systems. A dependency is a unidirectional relationship between two assets where the operations of one asset affect the operations of the other. An interdependency is a bidirectional relationship between two assets where the operations of both assets affect each other. These types of important operational relationships can increase the potential vulnerabilities to physical and cyber threats and potential consequences resulting from the compromise of underlying systems or networks. Achieving resilience can be challenging due to the highly complex nature of many infrastructure dependencies and interdependencies. The assessment of infrastructure resilience depends heavily on an understanding and evaluation of these dependent relationships and of the measures in place or not in place to mitigate the consequence of their potential disruption. The many points of connection amongst infrastructure systems and their often wide geographic distribution make the infrastructure risk management environment much more complex and demand a scale of engagement that exceeds single operators or governmental jurisdictions. Overlapping infrastructure operations crossing sectors and geographic regions pose coordination and cooperation problems that are not easily solved. These features of modern infrastructure operation necessitate a regional approach to assessing resilience that can accommodate both geographic scale of infrastructure systems, their dependencies, and the associated jurisdictional governance structures. Faced with an increasingly unpredictable threat environment that includes cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, service disruptions from aging infrastructure, highly disruptive weather events, and other hazards, critical infrastructure stakeholders understand that partnering to build resilience at the regional level is a key to achieving national resilience. A region can include a single community or multiple communities. It can transcend state boundaries to address select communities from multiple states, or even multiple states in their entirety. Using more flexible regional constructs in infrastructure resilience analysis allows participants to best align the boundaries of their assessment efforts to the questions they want to explore, rather than being locked strictly into existing jurisdictional footprints. A valuable element of regional assessments of critical infrastructure resilience is that these analyses can help bridge the gap between communities that have established geographical boundaries and governance structures in regions that reflect service areas of infrastructure, hazard exposure, and environmental factors that cut across one or more communities. Regional resilience analysis and the potential actions to strengthen resilience that arise from it can help communities work together to address broader resilience challenges that are too large to manage on their own. Efforts to understand, assess, and strengthen infrastructure resilience at a regional level face a diverse range of significant challenges. Some of the attributes that shape these challenges include the wide geographic reach of infrastructure systems, increased interconnectedness across infrastructure systems, integration of advanced information technologies, business practices such as industry consolidation and just-in-time supply, legal and regulatory requirements, an expanding risk environment. Identifying such challenges up front can help analysts approach regional infrastructure assessments from a more realistic context and better help define solutions and strategies. The graphics shown here represent resilience principles discussed previously in this video. See Part 1 of the methodology for more details. These various fundamental concepts just discussed provide a foundation for organizing successful regional infrastructure resilience assessments. Thinking about and examining critical, diverse, and interconnected infrastructure systems that span large geographic areas should always take full account of these concepts. Analysts and decision makers run the risk of incomplete or even counterproductive analytical efforts if these concepts are not properly integrated. Once this theoretical basis is established, the finer details of conducting regional infrastructure assessments can be focused upon. Turning this theory into practice through a repeatable process is the focus of Part 2 of the methodology. Part 2 of the methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience. As described, the heart of this document is a generalizable, scalable, 6-step methodology for assessing the resilience of critical infrastructure at a regional level, reflecting lessons learned from over 120 RRAP projects since 2009. The process begins with identifying an appropriate analytic question or problem affecting a region's infrastructure and continues through assessment design, data collection, analysis, documenting and delivering results, and promoting action to improve infrastructure resilience. It is important to note that this general sequence of steps can be altered as necessary. For example, some activities in different steps may need to run concurrently, and some earlier steps may need to be revisited as changes occur later in an assessment. All of these steps require partner engagement, whether to identify shared challenges, achieve buy-in, solicit data, vet potential findings and proposed actions, or support follow-on work. We will now walk through each step of the assessment process, discussing its purpose and providing more details on the types of activities that may occur. We will start with the cross-cutting need of engaging public and private sector partners when developing and implementing a regional infrastructure assessment. Details are found on page 25 through 27 of the methodology. Successful assessments incorporate continuous engagement with a variety of key partners. Some examples include owners and operators of infrastructure, industry trade associations, emergency response and recovery organizations, regulatory authorities, public utility commissions, metropolitan and regional planners, and academic institutions and research centers. Involvement of these types of organizations should span the entirety of a regional infrastructure assessment, from the initial identification of regional challenges and risks, through data collection, development of results, and pursuit of resilience solutions. Collaborative resilience strategies that are jointly developed with public and private sector partners maximize opportunities for success. Partnership is essential to the effective efforts to understand and strengthen resilience in a region. With this said, obtaining necessary buy-in from key partners, especially the private sector, on their voluntary participation in regional assessments can be challenging. There can be concerns about business proprietary information, time commitment, involvement of competitors and regulators, and other sensitivities. Identifying and effectively communicating the explicit partner-specific benefits of participation in regional assessments can help assuage such concerns. For example, benefits for private sector partners can include greater awareness of how their operations may be affected by disruptions to other infrastructure, implications for their business continuity planning, greater visibility into government planning efforts for mitigation, response, and recovery priorities, deeper disaster planning partnerships with public sector counterparts. Common benefits for government partners can include improved understanding of the operational requirements for critical infrastructure owners and operators, more realistic assumptions for disaster response and recovery, insights into possible cascading infrastructure failures, greater familiarity and coordination with private sector and other governmental entities. With a firm commitment to partner engagement, the first step in conducting an assessment of regional infrastructure resilience can begin. You can find Step 1 on pages 28 through 31 of the methodology. Step 1 is problem identification. To various degrees, communities across the country face a common set of gaps in understanding and addressing infrastructure resilience. As these gaps are identified, regional partners can use them to form the basis of regional assessments. Assessments start with a specific regional infrastructure question or problem in need of solving. Some assessments begin with a challenge or knowledge gap that has been identified based on real-world experience. In other instances, communities may proactively seek to understand how infrastructure resilience gaps observed elsewhere might apply to them before they experience a major infrastructure-related disruption. Excellent ideas and concepts for regional assessments can come from sources such as after-action analysis from real disasters, government and industry working groups, prior assessments or exercises, state and local hazard analysis, national strategic priorities for risk management and infrastructure resilience, long-standing local and regional awareness of infrastructure knowledge gaps. A successful assessment will often be anchored in pre-existing efforts in a region. Viable assessment concepts may have an air of familiarity to them, as they could be issues that have arisen before on multiple occasions, surface regularly during exercises, or relate to ongoing preparedness, mitigation, response, or recovery initiatives. They should reflect some degree of foundational knowledge and understanding within the region to confirm the need for such an assessment effort and the likelihood of multi-partner involvement. The successful culmination of Step 1 is the identification and general description of a regional infrastructure resilience problem that appropriate public and private sector regional partners have agreed is worthy of assessment. The need for the assessment is made clear. The general goals and outcomes are listed, and key partners are willing to contribute. With these actions in place, the second step in conducting assessment of regional infrastructure resilience can begin. You can find Step 2 on pages 32 through 40 of the methodology. Step 2 of the methodology is assessment design. Once a regional infrastructure resilience problem has been carefully identified, it is necessary to refine basic concepts into a viable assessment. This includes defining specific research questions and identifying specific activities that will occur. Refining concepts. This assessment design phase sets the stage for everything that follows, including data collection, analysis, communicating results, and ultimately taking action. A good but general project topic requires refinement to arrive at a clear research question that can drive the overall regional infrastructure assessment. For example, the general topic of drought and water supply can be focused to examine the impact of drought on agriculture in the California Central Valley. The additional examples displayed in this video can be found on page 33 of the methodology. This refinement process injects specificity into a topic and makes it more relevant to the region. Focus topics for resilience assessments tie together infrastructure issues, geographic locations, and consequences of concern. A focus topic should incorporate very specific questions or problems in need of solving. Selecting a focused assessment topic is influenced predominantly by two key factors. 1, the ultimate value that can come from answering the research question. 2, the willingness and ability of public and private sector stakeholders to provide necessary support. The most successful regional infrastructure assessments are those that address a specific issue of mutual concern and shared interest among all stakeholders, as these topics foster the greatest enthusiasm and willingness to contribute. Once a focused assessment topic is agreed to, discrete knowledge gaps must be identified. These can include regional partners' blind spots in their understanding or planning assumptions surrounding the topic. The knowledge gaps identified on the screen are discussed on page 35 of the methodology. Next, specific research questions must be developed. This should be done early in the process, as it protects against wasted time and effort in subsequent data collection and analysis. A specific research question narrows the study of focus, subdivides the research activities into manageable parts, drives data collection, and helps organize outputs. With research questions in hand, an analysis strategy comes next, including consideration of what data are needed, what analytic approaches are relevant and feasible, and what analytic outputs are most ideal. The analytic techniques selected will vary based on the identified research questions, the availability of required data, the tools and methodologies used, the capabilities of analysts, and the time and resources available. An important factor in designing the assessment is the amount of time that will be required to conduct the entire effort. For example, DHS RREP projects can take over 2 years, but this may not be practical or desired in other assessments. Keeping the overall objectives of the assessment process at the forefront can help the assessment team hedge against scope creep and stay on track in terms of budget and schedule. Once specific topics, knowledge gaps, research questions, and analytic approaches are agreed to, the third step in conducting an assessment of regional infrastructure resilience can begin. You can find Step 3 on pages 41 through 55 of the methodology. Step 3 of the methodology is data collection. The data used to support regional infrastructure assessments can be extremely diverse, including qualitative and quantitative information collected through various methods. Analysts often must collect and review disparate data from multiple infrastructure sectors to build a body of resources that can feed analysis activities. Prior to beginning data collection, an assessment must consider information security rules, requirements, and mechanisms to ensure that potentially sensitive data are protected in accordance with partner needs and applicable laws and guidelines. An effective data collection strategy involves careful forethought on information security, as it allows analysts to anticipate reservations that some infrastructure partners may have about sharing information and think through the mechanisms available to protect the collected information. For a list of information security regimes, see page 44 of the methodology. Once ready, data collection can involve a spectrum of different approaches. These can involve literature reviews, open source research, curated data sets, multi-organizational facilitated discussions, one-on-one interviews, structured surveys and assessments, tabletop exercises, and reviews of emergency plans. Depending on the nature of the topics being assessed and the scope of research, certain data collection methods may be more applicable or more effective than others. However, in all cases, data collection approaches must align with the desired outcomes of the regional infrastructure assessment and meet the timeframes and resource allocations that have been established. Once an assessment has identified the types of required data, addressed information security concerns, and completed data collection activities, the fourth step of the methodology can begin in earnest. You can find Step 4 on pages 56 through 87 of the methodology. Step 4 of the methodology is analysis. As data collection activities conclude, the focus shifts to analytic techniques for answering research questions. The analytical complexity of regional infrastructure assessments will vary based on a variety of factors, such as the type of project, nature of the research questions, size of the region, available resources, time constraints, and data availability. However, before beginning this analysis step, it is important to explicitly incorporate certain analytic standards. Research and analysis organizations in government and academia follow intellectual and analytic standards to preserve the integrity of their work and ensure that the results are defensible. For example, general standards utilized by the U.S. intelligence community provide a good framework that translates well into the regional infrastructure assessment process and should be incorporated where appropriate. Analytic techniques. When conducting the analysis step in a regional infrastructure assessment, numerous analytic techniques can be utilized. Some techniques have widespread applicability across many different types of assessments, while others are narrowly tailored to specific cases. Some techniques can be accomplished by analysts with a general skill set grounded in critical thinking, while other techniques require advanced technical skills in data science, engineering, geographical information systems, or other specialized areas. CISA's methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience talks through a wide variety of these analytic techniques and explains how some may fit better depending on the nature of the analysis. These approaches are discussed on page 58 of the methodology. A single regional infrastructure assessment can apply multiple analytic techniques to address a particular research question. Once an assessment has applied appropriate analytic techniques and synthesized and validated results with key stakeholders, the fifth step of the methodology can begin. You can find step 5 on pages 88 through 93 of the methodology. Step 5 of the methodology is documenting and delivering results. With analysis activities complete, it is now necessary to aggregate, document, and effectively present important results and findings. Key steps in this process include identifying the most compelling results and framing them as digestible findings for stakeholders. Developing potential courses of action that address resilience gaps identified through the assessment process. Presenting the results in formats that can effectively communicate information while also protecting information security and sensitive data. And sharing the results with key partners. Documenting the results. The final results of regional infrastructure assessments should not reflect a strictly academic exercise and/or be presented in a dense technical volume. Rather, the results should be developed for a potentially broad-based audience of government, private sector, and nonprofit entities with different professional backgrounds and areas of focus. Summarizing the bottom line results of an assessment has to resonate with such a diverse set of partners. A useful approach is to synthesize results into succinct key findings. Developing courses of action. To be an effective tool for regional resilience outcomes, an assessment must go beyond just identifying key findings and actually spell out proposed courses of action. These courses of action should be developed and socialized with assessment partners, especially those who may have a role in carrying them out. Well-constructed courses of action should clearly identify organizations that should lead or otherwise have a role in their execution. Provide logical solutions that are relevant to the issue identified in the key findings. Be realistically feasible within known constraints, and identify available resources that can assist in their execution. Presenting results. The assessment's key findings and associated courses of action, as well as the body of research and analysis, need to be presented to the stakeholders in compelling and useful formats. These can take various forms. Narrative reports that document analysis, key findings, and recommendations. Checklists that document resilience concerns at the assessment or system levels, and options for consideration to mitigate those vulnerabilities. Briefings and presentations for delivery at interagency meetings, workshops, or industry or academic conferences. Infographics that represent data and findings from the assessment in visually compelling formats that make it easier for users to understand and process important results. static and interactive mapping products that illustrate relevant findings and recommendations related to regional infrastructure systems. Decision support tools that help stakeholders test potential courses of action to make informed decisions. Compiled datasets, such as geospatial information, modeling outputs, and asset inventories that were collected, curated, or created during the assessment. Sharing results. After identifying and documenting meaningful results from the assessment, a final step is to share draft and final results with project stakeholders. For key stakeholders who participated in data collection activities or are primary audiences for the results of the assessment, sharing preliminary drafts of outputs is a suggested practice that can help maintain their buy-in for the effort, offer opportunities for validation and refinement of findings, and generate ideas for ways to close identified resilience gaps. As the results are finalized, assessment teams can prepare a dissemination strategy to guide decisions about what information they want to share with whom and when. Depending on the assessment, some materials may be germane to a broad audience, while other outputs may be targeted to specific recipients. Formal, post-assessment outbriefs and workshops offer additional avenues for sharing results with interested parties. Once key findings and proposed course of action have been documented, and various and appropriate products for conveying the results have been developed, reviewed, and presented, the last step of the methodology begins. You can find Step 6 on pages 94 through 99 of the methodology. The sixth and final step of the methodology is promoting action. While the assessment's data gathering, analysis, and various products are significant outcomes in and of themselves, they do not constitute the conclusion of such regional infrastructure assessment efforts. The outputs are intended to be part of a longer-term risk management process that leads to meaningful, measurable progress in improving regional resilience by stimulating continued cooperative action. Implementing specific measures to improve infrastructure resilience can strengthen and sustain partnerships that were developed and expanded during the regional assessment. At the same time, however, taking action to strengthen infrastructure resilience is inherently complicated and will stretch beyond the responsibilities and authority of the team of analysts conducting the assessments. The assessment approach outlined in CISA's methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience is intended to contribute to objective analysis to decision makers in government and the private sector for review and consideration. Political realities, budget constraints, governance complexities, and cross-sector stakeholder landscape are basic realities that regional partners must navigate as they look to address findings identified in such assessments. These challenges are particularly notable given that assessments are often voluntary efforts with no enforceable requirements to address issues that they identify and no regulatory mandates to implement recommendations. Obtaining buy-in from key partners during the initial problem identification and scoping phases of the assessment, and maintaining partner engagement throughout the assessment are thus critical to increasing the likelihood of partner action to act upon the findings and recommended actions. Some types of actions that can result from regional infrastructure assessment efforts include development or update of strategic, operational, and emergency plans, grant applications, capital investments, personnel training, new multi-stakeholder work groups and information sharing mechanisms, and joint tabletops and other exercises. An enduring part of any regional infrastructure assessment should be the documentation of outcomes and tracking of progress. Each action taken as a result of the assessment should have a clear measure associated with it that allows stakeholders to better understand and communicate the impact of the activities. Conclusion. This completes the summary of both Part 1, Foundational Concepts of Resilience, and Part 2, the 6-step process of CISA's methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience. We have provided a high-level overview of the various aspects of the methodology. However, we encourage you to review the additional detail, examples, and tips provided in the document. There is a Tying It All Together section that walks through several regional infrastructure assessments that were conducted under CISA's RRAP, highlighting basic details of how each step in the methodology was handled. To conclude, the methodology for assessing regional infrastructure resilience reflects countless lessons that CISA has learned through the RRAP. Its use in other efforts outside the RRAP is intended to bolster capabilities of many different organizations, communities, and regions to analyze, understand, and improve the resilience of critical infrastructure systems nationwide. CISA is here to help with and facilitate the types of infrastructure assessments and analysis discussed in the methodology. For further information, please visit our website or contact CISA at resilience@cisa.dhs.gov. Thank you again for watching.